The Los Angeles Kings are trying a very novel approach this season. It's not a youth movement, it's an elder movement. Is it going to mean playoffs? We'll discuss today on Locked On NHL.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in to Locked On NHL. I'm Seth, and no JD today, but in his place is Gil Martin, host of the Monday edition of Locked On NHL and host of Locked On Islanders as well. So a familiar face, and Gil, very fitting that we are going to have you on today because we will be talking about the Islanders in segment 2. On the rest of the show, we'll take a look at the Anaheim Ducks. Is their success this past season a building block or a flash in the pan? We'll also take a look at the New York Islanders. Can young players grab key spots in the roster? And we start by talking about the Los Angeles Kings, a team that is going in the other direction. Gil, this is one of the oldest rosters in the NHL, and it feels like they kind of doubled down on it this offseason. You bring in Matt Zuccarello, you've got Artemi Panarin, you've got a bunch of veteran players on this roster. And the thing that really just kind of the question that I keep coming back to with this team that has struggled to score, and it feels like a struggle to kind of keep up with the pace of the current NHL. Are they going to be able to buck the trends? And can they be a playoff team amongst all these teams that use speed and skill? Can they rely on the longer in the tooth players to get them to the promised land?
They kind of have to, right? And keep in mind, Anze Kopitar is retired, so he's not even part of the equation. If he would have stayed, they would have been even older. But I mean, you know, you've got Corey Perry, who's like 79 years old, right? In hockey years. I mean, you mentioned Zuccarello, Panarin, Scott Lawton. These are not young players, but that doesn't mean they're not necessarily good players either.
Yeah, it's a roster that has certainly plenty of skill. Quentin Byfield is a fantastic player, and he is a little on the younger side. Kevin Fiala from his days with the Minnesota Wild, he's certainly still a good player, but there's some injury concerns that kind of come with him. You know, if you look at the real big question as far as the age is concerned, for me, it's what happens between the pipes. You've got Darcy Kuemper, who is 36, and he's been with the Kings for the last few seasons. You also went and grabbed Anton Forsberg. And if you need a third goalie, you've got Phoenix Copley, who is also 34. Your goaltending room, 36, 34, 33. And there are some durability concerns with those guys as well. So if you suffer an injury between the net or you don't get like this extremely high-end performance, this is a team that has majorly struggled to score. And so if they don't get that good goaltending, especially against some of these high-flying teams in the Pacific, I feel like they're going to have some problems.
Yeah, that's very possible. I guess the question is, does the coaching change mean a change in approach? Because they have always been a defense-first team, a team that tries to beat you 2-1. And now I don't know if that's what we're going to see this upcoming season. And that could, I mean, we could see a lot more 5-3 or 5-4 games involving the LA Kings. Now, do they have the horses to play that style and still win? That's a whole, different issue. And I think we're going to find that out come the fall.
And you look at this Kings team this past season, 225 goals scored, which was near the bottom as far as the Western Conference is concerned. If you back it up even the last few years beyond that, they did when they finished second in the Pacific. They got up to 250 but that's still like, that's not a high number as far as goals are concerned. Like, that's below 3 goals per game. So they've always been a team that has kind of relied on that tough, brutish strength and that sandpaper game. But that can only carry you so far. Just ask the Calgary Flames. I mean, if you're not able to score goals on a consistent basis, that just puts so much pressure on every other aspect of your team. And especially, like, I keep looking at who they're going to be going toe to toe with to try to be one of the top 3 in the Pacific this year. Edmonton, always a team that scores a ton of goals, obviously with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. The Anaheim Ducks, they scored a fair amount of goals. They've got young talent that's going to be able to deliver that. Vegas always has 3 or 4 guys that have like 25 goal seasons, and you're just like, that was a third liner for this other team that now comes here and he plays a predominant role. So, you're going to have to find a way. And I didn't even talk about the Sharks, who have one of the best young players in the league.
Right.
You're going to have to find a way to get some goals in the net. And then I start to look at this roster, and it's like, who are the guys that are going to step up and be the ones beyond, your Fiala, your Panarin? Like, who are going to be the guys beyond that are going to be scoring all the goals?
Yeah, it's a fair question, and I don't know if there's an answer. One thing they do need to do, however, last year, special teams, 28th on the power play, 30th on the penalty kill. You got to be better than that if you want to have any chance of contending in the National Hockey League.
And so many games that they came up short. Like, they were good enough in 20 different games. Think about that. A quarter of your season, you were good enough to get to overtime, but you still lost. Right. Like, you picked up 20 overtime points in 20 different games. Like, this was something that, back to I don't know why I'm tying the Calgary Flames in multiple times this episode, but back to the last year of Daryl Sutter, it felt like a team that just found ways to lose. And if you can take 20 of those games and you can find a way to win 8 of them, like, you add additional points there, then all of a sudden you're looking at a team that has the most wins in the division, like 22 regulation wins last year. Like, and I think that is just a perfect indication of the lack of offense. Like, right. You're really having to grind and to pull and to fight to win these games. And if they could pick up a goal here or there, they're going to find a way to win some more games.
Yeah, it's like this team has a tendency of holding on for dear life and trying to squeeze a point out of almost any game. And, look, sometimes that works, but it's not something that's going to get you beyond mediocrity unless you've got an elite goaltender who's really going to bail your team out, and you're going to win 1-0, 2-1, that kind of a thing. Peter Laviolette being the coach, I get the feeling they will open up a little bit more than what they have done in the past. But do they have the horses? Do they have the speed on this roster? I mean, is Drew Doughty still a top pair defenseman for this team at this point? And what does he have left in the tank? And can he stay healthy? And when you have older guys, and as someone who's covered the Islanders recently, I'm familiar with this. Older players tend to get injured more frequently, and they take longer to come back than, if you're 35, it's going to take you longer than if you're 21. Just human biology. And how does that set the Kings up at this point for this upcoming season?
It feels to me, just in kind of the looking through the windows, like outside the store, looking at the merchandise, it feels to me like a team that's like, we're going to give this 1 or 2 more goes with this current iteration, and then we're going to have to really think about how we proceed. So let's do this to finish our chat on the Kings. What do we think is the the ceiling, the best case scenario for this Kings team this year. If I had to pick a spot, I think is most likely. This feels like a wild card 2 team to me.
Yeah, I could see, the Pacific is kind of uneven. You're not sure what you're getting in that division. So I think maybe third place in the division would be a best case scenario, but a lot would have to go right. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, they're one of the teams in the West that it feels like they have to avoid major injuries. They have to have a few players that really stand out, like Matt Zuccarello being like maybe a just under a point per game player for them and really helping out on special teams on the power play. They're going to need a few guys to do that, but then they're going to need somebody above them to just get taken to the cleaners as far as the injuries are concerned. So I don't see this as a team that's going to be majorly competitive as far as the top end of the Pacific and the West goes. But if they find some guys that can step up, they certainly could. They certainly could be a team fighting for a playoff spot to the end of the year.
Absolutely, and they're a team that could get into the playoffs again if certain things break right.
Similar feel, I'm sure, for the next team that we'll talk about that very well, the New York Islanders. We'll talk about what the Islanders are facing this upcoming season, youth movements, veteran players. We will discuss as we continue today's episode of Locked On NHL right after this.
Locked On NHL is brought to you by FanDuel. Baseball fans, if you think you know who's hitting a homer today, FanDuel is giving you a free chance to call your shot with daily dingers. It's easy to play. Just make your free pick for who you think will hit a home run in their game. If you're right, you'll receive a profit boost to use on your next bet for a chance at extra winnings. Best of all, you can make a free pick every day throughout the MLB season. Daily Dingers is another fun way to stay engaged with every day's games, whether you're following your favorite team or keeping an eye on matchups across the league. Every game has someone capable of going deep. Now you get the chance to make your prediction before the first pitch. Sometimes it's a hitter who's been on a hot streak, a favorable pitching matchup, or even a ballpark that tends to give up home runs. Those are always the first things I look at before making my Daily Dingers pick. So are you ready to play your game today? Join all the action at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com to play Daily Dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, an official partner of the MLB.
Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On NHL. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen each and every day. Reminder, even though we are in the off-season, Locked On NHL is coming at you every single day of the week. So make sure to check out every show. We hit you with a bunch of different NHL topics all the way through the off-season. Gil, we're talking New York Islanders here for segment 2, a team obviously you're very familiar with as host of Locked On Islanders. And it's an Islanders team that I think feels pretty similar to where the Los Angeles Kings are at, some of those other teams in the East as well, where you've got a more veteran team. For those other teams, however, they do not have Matthew Schaefer. So the Islanders certainly going to be building around him for the upcoming season. Is that a fair assessment of where the Islanders are at? It's just a veteran team that's kind of hoping everybody can do what they have previously done to make the postseason this year?
Yeah, I think the Islanders are kind of counting on the Peter DeBoer effect, I think, to a large extent, where under Patrick Waugh, he wanted to play an up-tempo kind of a game, which the team really doesn't have the horses to play, and there just wasn't enough defensive structure. And DeBoer has already said, and he coached the team for all of 4 games at the end of last season, but he's already said, we have to get more defensive structure. And, everyone's very high on Matthew Schaefer, and understandably so, but I'd still say Ilya Sorokin is the best player right now on this Islanders team. So you get that defensive structure in place, and you're helping your best player be at his best. You're getting back Kyle Palmieri healthy. You're getting back Alexander Romanov healthy. Schaefer is now in his second year rather than as a rookie. The hope is that will be enough. But the good news for the Islanders is there's a lot of prospects now in the pipeline, and they're probably most of them a year or two away. But I would say in the next 12 months, we're going to see a lot of roster turnover from some of these veteran players.
And that's the exciting part too, when you get to that point as a franchise to where you've got these mainstay guys that have been around for quite a while, but at some point, they're either going to move on via free agency, move on via trade, or they're going to retire. And then you say, all right, let's plug this player in here. Let's plug this player in here and just fill those vacancies up. As far as the Eastern Conference is concerned, you brought up a really good point with Ilya Sorokin being one of the best goalies in the NHL. You can afford to kind of lean on those guys from time to time. You don't want to do what, say, the New York Jets do with Connor Hellebuck, where you're just expecting them to win you 50 games a season. But if your offense goes through a little bit of a rut, your goaltender can say, all right, I can, for this like 2 or 3 week stretch, I can take a goal off the board. I can take one goal, half a goal off the board every night. And so, couple that with Peter DeBoer's strategy, it feels like an Islanders team that can kind of lean on what they've done previously to get back into the mix this year.
Yeah, that's the hope. I think more than anything, this is going to be a transition year. This is sort of the last hurrah. I mean, you got Casey Cizikas, he's 35, 36. He's on the last year of his contract. Palmieri's on the last year of his contract. Andre Palat is on the last year of his contract. The Islanders, theoretically, as of now, are scheduled to have $40.6 million in cap space next offseason. And they could add to that if they're smart and make some trades, at or before the deadline or even at the draft next year. That opens up some real possibilities. So I think, you've got Victor Eklund, who probably will play in the NHL at some point this season. Not sure if it'll be game one. You've got Kashawn Aitchison, a physical defenseman who, was the best defenseman in the OHL last year. You've got Malte Gustafsson, their first round pick this year, who's already played 1 year in Sweden against men. These are, and you got Cole Yzerman, a gifted goal scorer who is going to start the season in Hamilton. I have to always remember not to say Bridgeport, Hamilton of the AHL. So these are, former high picks who are almost there, but not quite there yet. So one more year with the older guys, and then I think we start to see some turnover.
Yeah, and give it a go. And if things aren't going well with so many guys in the final year of their deal, the Islanders could stand to be, if they're not in a playoff position, they could stand to be one of the more active teams of the trade deadline.
Absolutely. And then that $40.6 million can be increased as a result, or even just subbing out a 35-year-old player for a comparable 25-year-old player would probably A, reduce your cap hit, and B, help the long-term outlook of the team.
Most definitely. What are you thinking is the best case scenario for this Islanders team this year?
I think the best case scenario is that DeBoer's change of system, a good, healthy year by Sorokin, they could squeeze into the playoffs again, most likely as a wild card. The issue is that so many of the other teams in the East did so much to get better this offseason. And the Islanders, their big addition was Matias Michelli. And not to knock Matias Michelli, because he's not a bad player, but he's not a needle mover in the sense of, oh my gosh, now we're all set at wing because we have this new player. So I think they'll either just make or just miss the playoffs, which is where they've been for the last 5 or 6 years.
I look at this, especially in the Metropolitan, like I don't think anybody expects the Carolina Hurricanes to have a major drop-off this year. Right. But, Is it conceivable that the Pittsburgh Penguins could be 5 or 6 points worse? Sure. Pittsburgh had a lot fall into place this year. They also had 16 overtime losses. So you take a few points out of that, and all of a sudden they're at like 92. Could the Philadelphia Flyers be 5 or 6 points worse? Certainly could. Washington, I think many expect will be at least a little bit better. Columbus, kind of in that mix. And so for the Islanders, if they can find a way to make up, 8 points, 7, 8 points, that's 4 additional games. If they can find a way to win 4 games this year, that should put them in the mix for, the 3rd or the 4th spot in the Metropolitan, which then has them right in that wild card mix.
Yeah, the only caveat to that is the Islanders were 10-0 in overtime last year, which is hard to duplicate. But, they have Schaefer, they have Bo Horvat to finish, and they have Matthew Barzal, who excels with all that open ice. That top 3 was the big reason, that and Sorokin, that they were able to be that effective in overtime. But can't ask them to replicate 10-0, can you?
That's certainly a tall order, which is a perfect segue for the final team that we'll talk about today. The Anaheim Ducks found their way into the postseason this past year, but many, many questions remain for this Anaheim Ducks team. We'll discuss whether Anaheim will find their way back in, or if this was a lightning strikes once scenario. That's all coming up as we finish today's episode of Locked On NHL after this. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On NHL. And once again, I will remind you, even though we are in the throes of the offseason, Locked On NHL has you covered every day of the week. So make sure to join us throughout the week for the big stories surrounding your favorite NHL teams. And for deeper dives, you can, of course, find your favorite show in the Locked On NHL network. Gil, let's talk about the Anaheim Ducks, who finished in the 3rd spot in the Pacific this past season. And they went all the way to the brink with the Vegas Golden Knights this past year. And unfortunately, they came up just a little bit short. After beating Edmonton in round 1, and not just beating Edmonton, but beating them pretty emphatically in that first round series. Can the Ducks do it again? Like, does this have staying power, or was this just one of my favorite analogies to use when talking about these types of teams? Was this just Anaheim getting their head above water for a second to grab a breath before they go back under?
I think there's reasons for optimism still in Anaheim. There's some real talent here. And, Joel Quenneville is a proven winner as a coach. He's got multiple Stanley Cups under his belt. And, he finds a way to get the most out of his teams. You look up and down this roster. I mean, you have a 40-goal scorer in Cutter Gauthier. You've got Leo Carlson, the richest man briefly in the NHL. There is talent here. And I think this is a team that, especially in the Pacific, could be in the thick of the fight again with the Vegases and the Edmontons.
I think there is certainly some optimism that you've got your guy in the net. In Lucas Dostal. I think people are pretty excited with what he will bring to the table. As you said, some nice young talent on this roster, but I will point to one thing for sure that they need to work on, and they need to sink some major investment into. They have got to find a decor somewhere. Yep. Somehow. I mean, they gave up 288 goals this past year, which was the 3rd most in the entire Western Conference. And it felt like there were so many different points where Lucas Dostal just gets, even in those playoff series, like just so many different instances where he just gets left on an island and there's no help to try to keep the puck out. And I'm sure, having a couple of things, having your offense short up, having your forward group short up, having your goaltending short up. Now you can say, okay, let's take a look and sink some assets into this decor now. But for them to, I think, really take the next step and to become a bona fide contender in the Western Conference, that has to be looked at some point.
Yeah, no question. I mean, 29th in the league in goals allowed, 27th on the penalty kill. They've got to shore up the defense. And, one thing, they play an exciting brand of hockey. I mean, they're fun to watch. If you tune in, if you stay up late, if you're on the East Coast and watch, an Anaheim Ducks game, they're entertaining, but they've got to shore up that defense because, you're offense sells tickets, defense wins championships. That's the cliche, and it's a cliche for a reason. You're not going on a long Stanley Cup run in the postseason if you can't keep the puck out of your own net.
Yeah, it is going to doom them in the same way that it did in the series against Vegas, where it felt like they just every time they came back to mount a comeback, it felt like that backbreaker goal was just waiting for them every time. So, you've got guys on that roster that certainly are intriguing options, but Jackson Lacombe, you've got Pavel Minchikov, who came over to the Ducks roster. So you've got some young pieces to build around that group, but you need to continue that cultivation, and you got to get younger. You got to get better skaters on the back end, but you also got to get guys that don't get caught in between as much as if it just every time there was a goal given up, it felt like it was multiple Ducks players that were just caught in between, one step too slow, one step early. And so some of that falls on the coaching, but some of it is, as far as the players go too, just knowing where you need to be and just stepping up and making a play.
Yeah, and I think sometimes they got a little too aggressive, tried to do a little too much offensively, and it looks great on the stat sheet until you look at those plus-minus numbers.
Yeah, there were plenty of those in both series, by the way. It will be really interesting to see too, after this after the Leo Carlsson contract starts to really sink in and they build around that. Once we figure out what the number is for Cutter Gauthier, then you're going to be able to determine how much is left to try to sink in. Do you go grab a veteran defenseman? Do you trade for one? If they can get any level of blue line help for that back end, then that's gonna shore them up. But it's interesting because you look at the Pacific, and as far as like what the ceiling is, what the best case scenario is for this Ducks team, I think it's still a good enough Ducks team to finish in at least the top three.
Yeah, I could easily see them in second place or even first if a few things break right, but they've really got to get more from that blue line core in order to make that happen. But again, I like the coach as far as his track record on the ice is concerned. I like the young talent. One thing that they really need, that the goaltending is there. They just need to get that blue line straightened out, and that's easier said than done.
Yeah, I could very much see all these young guys taking a step forward and turning that into a number two, especially if Edmonton does not get any level of goaltending. And let's be honest, the goaltending room that they've put together, how there's any level of optimism surrounding that goaltending room, I have no idea, because it's kind of frightening.
Yeah, it is. It's really holding your breath and hoping. It's what that goaltending room kind of looks like right now. And, look, there's 84 games and then there's playoffs. A lot can change between now and April.
Very well said. That will do it for today's episode of Locked On NHL. Once again, make sure to hit that like button on YouTube. before you head out. And follow us on all of your favorite audio platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We have you covered every Monday through Friday here at Locked On NHL, all off-season long. So make sure to stay with us as we move through the offseason, all the biggest stories right here on Locked On NHL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.